Greetings. Of all the 5 basics that I teach in the unnamed Kaliana way, meditation practice, ultimate reality, who am I, taking responsibility, and interior domain. No one of them is more important than the others. But notice, if you've been working with me, in the 5 basics, there's probably 1 or 2 that you favor, 1 or 2 techniques or principles or components that you emphasize, and maybe 1 or 2 that kind of fade to the background and get underdeveloped. There is a subcategory of a practice, if you will, that I mention in my Unnamed Kaliana Way book that is very prominent in the workbook that some of you have done, and that you've probably heard me talk about here and there, but which I have recently gotten the inspiration to teach more officially and actually create a full course, and possibly even have a separate group meeting or call or gathering just for this practice, because it's so important. And that is working with koans. Now remember, or hear for the first time, that koan practice is traditionally a Zen practice, a Zen technique. The intention of it is by contemplating words, phrases, pointings, sometimes riddles or word puzzles. Sometimes they can even be short poems or stories or parables. But the intention is not for it to be artistically pleasing necessarily. Even if it's a poem, it's not to be enjoyed for poetry's sake, in other words. It's also not a mantra. And even though you might memorize and internalize the words, the phrasing, mantra work is something else altogether that I know a little about, but I don't even practice it or teach it much for various reasons. But in mantra practice, you are basically mentally repeating a phrase over and over and over again. That's not koan work either. Nor is it affirmation work, which, as you probably know, I also don't work with or teach really at all. I would be much more open to mantra work, in fact, than affirmation work. Again, for various reasons that I go into in other places and don't have to go into now. So it's not a self-talk. It's not a mantra. It's not poetry. But koans are intended to evoke through contemplating them, through just being in their field and taking your consciousness to the place that the koan is pointing you to, is to evoke a shift in awareness, another state of being, if you will. And in particular, a facet of the ultimate reality. Now, you may have also heard me say this. The ultimate reality is self-evident. The ultimate reality is only one ultimate reality. But in my experience of the ultimate reality, there are different flavors. And this gets pretty paradoxical because ultimately, the ultimate is beyond all flavors, beyond all facets, beyond all details, beyond all perspectives. But at the same time, I believe and I experience that ultimate awareness, ultimate presence, ultimate present moment, ultimate beingness, etc., are slightly different shades of the same one ultimate reality and can be experienced differently, even though the ultimate reality itself is beyond experience. There is this body-mind filter, perceiver, experiencer, interpreter of that which is beyond perception, experience, interpretation. So, it's important in the overall scheme of the Unnamed Kaliana Way and the 5 basics to be able to access, activate at will, and to root in as a more or less permanent reality. More and more and more, really. The ultimate reality and all of the different facets and details of it. And in future teachings and publications, I already have outlined how I'm going to actually expand and take the ultimate reality even beyond itself into what I'm going to call the absolute and the supreme. But ultimate, absolute, and supreme are all still umbrellaed under what you might call the ultimate reality. Once you tip beyond relative into ultimate, then it's ultimate from there on out. But I've kind of subdivided it into ultimate, absolute, and supreme, which we'll talk about another time, another place. There are many ways to access the ultimate reality. There are many ways that it can be turned on for you, many ways for you to practice tuning into it. Koan work is just one of those, and I have found it to be very effective for me. I actually never worked with a teacher or in any other system or style in Koans. I just know about it, and it has emerged as a viable way to access the ultimate reality. And I've actually recently been working with some of my longtime students as well as some brand new students, specifically more intentionally with Koans. It might not be your cup of tea, but give it a try first, and notice if it's not just the ego saying it's not my cup of tea. Because this is very counter to our conditioning, this way of perceiving reality. It's very counter to our conditioning. So at first it might seem confusing or frustrating or annoying or out of reach, in which you should remember, even though the Koan practice itself, among all the other ways to approach the ultimate reality, is kind of a more cerebral experience at first until it sinks into the direct experience. It's a little more cerebral. It's kind of like solving a puzzle or a riddle or cracking a code. But at the same time, it's not something to figure out. It's not something to analyze. It's not something to think about. The ultimate reality itself is beyond the mind, is beyond concept, is beyond ideas. So give it a try. I know you'll get something out of it. And especially if you think, this just isn't resonating with me, maybe it's actually good medicine for you. That which causes friction is sometimes very beneficial and a friendly companion. You can apply some Pratipaksha Bhavana in that regard. So the traditional way that Koan practice is implemented in the Zen tradition is directly between teacher and student. Teacher and student have a meeting. The teacher gives the student a koan. Again, it's a phrase that might sound a little funny, or might sound like, duh, that's obvious, or it might do something interesting to the regular thinking mind. But the student then goes and contemplates it, wrestles with it for as long as necessary, or for a week, or for however long the teacher says. And once the student has an experience, not a scientific formula or analysis, but has an experience that's been elicited by the koan, then they come back to the teacher and they describe what they saw, what they felt, what they experienced, what they got from it, what happened. And the teacher basically gives thumbs up or thumbs down. It's not like right or wrong answer, but it's like you're seeing it clearly or not. You got the appropriate response or not. And if it was thumbs up, then the teacher would give the student another one to wrestle with. And in that tradition, it would get more difficult and more difficult each one. If it was thumbs down, then they return to continue wrestling with it until next time, and they can try again to see if they got it. One of the reasons that I'm inspired to do this Koan course is because I've actually recently been studying some cutting edge and also alternative, you might even say otherworldly, science knowledge. And science is not traditionally, in that kind of material science, my cup of tea, which is one reason why I like to apply my mind to it, to at least try to understand something of it and to exercise different parts of my brain, mind, and consciousness. And what I'm realizing is a lot of the principles and truths that are commonly accepted in this uncommon and unconventional scientific model are truths that have been either downloaded, transmitted, or channeled from higher order beings or species or civilizations, or emerged from the depths of a mathematical mind. Some of those same ones I already understand directly from the different flavors and facets of the ultimate reality, because I have spent a lot of time contemplating them. And a lot of our scientists and mathematicians, currently and anciently, were actually mystics at heart. They connected with God or the ultimate reality through this method. And so math or science or experimentation or lab work or formulas, equations, were one of their mediums to accessing the ultimate reality or communing with God, just like Koan work. So perhaps because I love words and I'm a writer and I'm a reader, I'm a wordsmith, words to me do a similar kind of unlocking phenomenon to that ultimate reality as numbers do for other people, or paintings do for others, or music, or anything else that can access the ultimate reality, or nature. But remember, ultimate is ultimate and relative is relative. So it's not just an expanded relative state, it's the actual ultimate. But within that, there are many different flavors and facets and nuances. So I love words. I've tried in my own Koan teaching with some of you and with others different formats. I've tried the slow and steady step-by-step teacher-student approach that I just described, which is popular in the Zen tradition. One at a time, one-on-one, wrestling, back and forth, question-answer kind of thing. I've also tried putting the koans into a workbook with some journal prompts, some questions to spark writing for yourself in regards to the koan. If I'm not working with you one-on-one directly, then I've given instructions to take these at your own pace. Here's 30 or so koans with some questions and journal prompts. Go at your own pace. You can take one each day, or you can take one each week, or you can take one until you feel like you got a nice taste of the ultimate reality, or at least a shift in perspective, and then move on to the next one. You don't have to totally, quote-unquote, solve it all at once. Because it is my opinion that especially in our current world, where our attention span is kind of waning by the day, these things really require commitment, attention, dedication, and going back to it over and over and over, just like any other skill or lifestyle that you're wanting to get better at or master. So that's one reason why I can kind of give it to you on your own and you go through it at your own pace. But it's also beneficial to check in with the teacher to see if the aimed for experience was elicited and that you're seeing clearly. But at the same time, not having to crack the code all at once before you go to the next one is also okay, because maybe what you missed in the first one you get from the next one. Because in my list of them, my collection of koans, it's not necessarily that they get harder and harder and more advanced and more advanced. So if you miss something here, then another light bulb might go off here, and then you fill in a gap back for this one 5 koans ago, etc. One of the goals of koan practice, or one of the results that happens with koan practice and in general tuning into the ultimate reality, which does in fact span all 5 basics. You can see where the ultimate reality tiptoes into the who am I section, the interior domain section, the projection, taking responsibility section, the meditation section. One of the goals or end results is a reorientation to truth, or clear seeing, if you will. The world we live in is inside out and upside down. We are not taught to see clearly or to perceive clearly the way things actually are, and it reflects in our language, speaking of words. So in my opinion, these koans help to reorient, which might also bring about a disorientation before a reorientation, because the way you're oriented now is backwards and inside out. You're not perceiving clearly based on conditioning. And there's a reason for that, which we can go into at another time. Why have we been taught the complete opposite of truth? But just like a good chiropractic adjustment, in the chiropractic world, there's a term called subluxation, which literally means beneath the light. Sublux, beneath light. So like less than optimal, less than perfect, if you will. Which means the vertebra has come out of alignment, which is causing all sorts of miscommunications and all sorts of misfirings and malfunctionings in the spinal cord and other things, and how it extends out to the extremities and connects to the brain, etc. And all that's required is for the chiropractor to click the vertebra back into alignment, and the communications, the movement, the nervous system starts working as it was intended to, naturally. So it's my opinion that these koans simply do their work on you if you allow them to, if you apply your mind, not the ego mind. In all the traditions, there's a difference between like lower mind and higher mind, or ego mind and intuitive mind. So if you apply your higher mind to these koans and just wrestle with them, again, not with the frontal lobe, but with perception itself, direct seeing, trying on what it's pointing to, and really having sharp and keen discernment, discrimination. Discrimination is a word we're a little afraid of right now, but it's a word that was used a lot in the ancient traditions. Can you discriminate between right and wrong? Can you discriminate between relative and ultimate? Can you discriminate between changing and unchanging? Can you discriminate between body, and mind? Can you discriminate between self and other? Can you discriminate between subject and object? Until eventually that duality becomes one. But discrimination, discernment, is important at first. So when you really wrestle with these things, they carry a seed of wisdom, a seed of knowledge that gets planted in your being and can sprout and take root. And yes, you'll memorize the phrasing of it, but that's not important. Again, it's not poetry, it's not affirmation, it's not mantra. Something will awaken, a new groove, a new pathway, a new experience will awaken. And the koan is kind of the little track to get back there. And in my mind, they're kind of like little pills or supplements or medicines for clear seeing, for reorienting our misperceptions, our inside out and backwards and upside downs. And once you have that flip occur, oh, this is the way it is. Oh, this is reality. And it's self-evident. It's not an opinion. It's, oh, I see it now. Oh. And then a whole kind of backwash might occur in your reorientating process, in then bringing the relative body-mind persona experience into alignment with that. That is the truth of the truth of the truth, capital T. And it has always been that way. But my little t truth in my relative conditioned ego, body-mind, has been seeing it another way. So then the two come into alignment, and you wouldn't believe how everything changes. How you see the world differently, experience the world differently, and yourself and others and God. And how life itself becomes better, because now you're in alignment, now you're seeing clearly, and everything else falls into place effortlessly, naturally, because it is your quote-unquote true nature. It is your essence. And these are just little tricks, little tools, little techniques to get you back to that. And the koans themselves often are tricky themselves, because things that feel comfortable to the relative conditioned mind doesn't cause it to question anything ever. So it kind of throws a kink or a stick in the spoke of your wheel. It kind of disrupts your normal way of thinking, because we're very monotonously droning about, being told what to do, not really thinking, not really seeing clearly, not perceiving reality as reality. So koan practice helps you turn that around, see clearly, and then your expression, your manifestation of the relative form then changes very naturally, the way it's supposed to be. But again, because it's countercultural, there can be a process, and there can be a little bit of backlog of conditioning to continue persisting in the rewiring process. So, my plan for this course is to actually make videos on each of the koans that I've written. And I have written all of them. Like I said, I've never worked with a teacher in koan practice. So, it's truths or phrases or pointings that I've come to in my own seeing, and then I put it into my own words to then, so it was born from my own experience of a particular shade of reality or the ultimate. I put words to it because I like words. It's just like a mathematical formula that points to a truth in its own system. So it's a linguistic formula that I want to give to you, that if you can then solve the equation, quote unquote, hopefully you can experience the same place that it was born from. Some of them, language is language, and some of them, the essence of them, the vibration of it, I might have picked up along the way from another teacher, because they do point to universal truths anyway. And so it's not plagiarism at all. It's universal truth. It's like many different teachers that I've learned from are saying a similar thing, but I have not explicitly copied this from anyone else. And some I did very much come up with, quote unquote, on my own, or were given to me. So some might sound like something you've heard before, some might sound something brand new. But this is not something that I've got from another system or from another teacher or mentor or influence. I've come up with it on my own based on my knowledge and understanding of Zen koans and just from my own practice. Which leads me to one final point, and that is the art or practice of contemplation, which is in fact different than meditation, and all the traditions have a difference. They might word it differently. Actually, the ancient Christian monastic tradition has a difference. In Latin, they say meditatio and contemplatio, meditation, contemplation. But interestingly enough, the way I use them and the way most of us use those two terms these days was actually opposite of the way they use them. So just let that go for now. But suffice it to say, for me, meditation is using a anchor or technique to focus your mind on, to take you into a meditative state. The goal in meditation is simply stay with that technique, like in my methods: turn and face your thoughts, gaze at the mind field, alert, alive, awake, attentive, phenomenal world, gaze behind your closed eyelids, etc. Those of you who have worked with me know I have many techniques. In meditation, you bring that technique to mind and you've set aside 10, 20, 30 minutes, however long, and your only goal is, when you notice the mind in autopilot or idle mode or distracted mode or wandering mode or analyzing mode or thinking mode, you simply notice that and return to the technique. Notice that and return to the technique as many times as it takes to shift you into not necessarily an ultimate space, but a meditative space, either subtle dream theta world or void causal delta world. And I'm not going to go into all that now, but the ultimate reality is supporting that, is upholding the meditative states. And meditation can be a gateway into an awakening of the ultimate, but meditative states are not equal necessarily to the ultimate. So, that is different than contemplation. Contemplation is taking a truth or contemplating a flower or the sunset or contemplating a concept like love or contemplating a koan, which means more like taking it deep into your heart or into your higher mind, like I'm saying, and just rolling it around in there, working with it in a more philosophical way. But philosophical way doesn't just have to mean cerebral, frontal lobe, analytical thinking only, but to get a relationship with it, to feel into it, to be with it, to see what it does to you, to see different angles of perception and perspective you can bring to it, to look clearly and deeply into something. That's contemplation, and it may shift you into a meditative state, an ultimate state, or not. I'll be using that term ultimate state kind of loosely here and there, because the ultimate is not a state, because states by nature come and go, and the ultimate reality does not come or go. What does come and go is experiences of it, or peak states of the ultimate reality. The goal is the stability, the stable nature of the not coming and going, the unchanging in yourself. So meditation is separate from contemplation, but the two very much go together. You can eventually use one of these phrases for meditation, but I'd like for you to talk to me about that first, because it's not one of the official techniques that I use for meditation. Each meditation technique is slightly different. It really doesn't matter which technique you use in meditation. It's just something to occupy the mind, but at the same time, I like for you to exercise all of them. In contemplation, it does matter because the content of what you're contemplating is important. So my plan is to make a separate video for each koan. At least 30. I have many more than 30, but 30 is kind of my standard number that I work with students. So I want to make a video that will support your own contemplation of the koan. I want to give some pointings. I want to give some guidelines. I want to give some reflection, some of my own experience, some suggestions for how you can work with that koan. We'll probably also utilize some of the worksheets. I might put that up in the supplemental material folder of the group course. The journal prompts. But mostly, I want you to just kind of immerse yourself in the koan, in the video I'm going to make, in the guidance I'm going to give, in my pointings, and watch it over and over. And let that, you could stay with one video per week, or as long as it takes, or per day, or at this point, at whatever rate I'm making the videos. You can write it on your bathroom mirror, or write it somewhere and put it in your pocket, but again, it's not for the sake of the same purpose that people use affirmations for. It's not trying to convince yourself of something. It's a truth, it's a seed of an aspect of reality, big R. You can memorize it just so that it kind of stays with you throughout the day. Apply it to whatever situation you're in, as well as take time just to sit and be quiet in that truth, in those pointings, with the video, journaling, in solitude, being quiet, and considering it there as well. So not just throughout your busy day. And of course, all of these apply, and since it's not tipping you into a meditative state necessarily, then you should be fine to be doing whatever else you're doing, including driving a car and operating heavy machinery. But be very careful with that, of course, too, because it can elicit an expanded state that shifts you away from your relative body-mind, in which case that might be dangerous if you're driving or doing something that you need to stay focused on. But at the same time, it is reality itself, so eventually, once the reorientation happens, you are more fluidly aware in and as it throughout the day. Whether you're awake or asleep or meditating, it doesn't matter. Or working or relaxing. So I've been kind of blown away at some of these cutting edge, unconventional, alternative science truths that I don't entirely understand, because that's not my language. But as far as the details of the formulas and the equations, but I do translate it instantly over into my language, and it's exactly these koans. It's exactly this perception that I see on a moment-to-moment basis from the ultimate reality. It's pretty profound. And I also think that it is of a higher plane, even though it is the truth of of the third dimensional plane. It is of a higher plane, and can also, for those of you interested in ascension, assist your ascension process. But remember, this is only one of the 5 basics and only one technique. So there's a lot of systems and traditions that emphasize the ultimate reality only and don't promote meditation, don't promote taking responsibility and understanding relative shadow, ego, projection work. And to me, you have to have both. Especially because if you have a very immature, unevolved, underdeveloped shadow side or subpersonality or relative self, when you awaken to this ultimate reality, that actually might get embedded more. It might perpetuate that. In the sense of freedom that the ultimate reality brings, quote unquote, free to do what I want, becomes very immature and irresponsible and careless. So I just have felt inspired to provide this course and to hone in more on koans in particular, but not as a replacement, just as a supplement for all the others. Because once you do start seeing clearly, hopefully that inspires even more of the interior work and the relative work and the shadow work and the projection work to see where you've not been seeing clearly. But that's not necessarily guaranteed. That's why we have so-called spiritual masters and enlightened beings that are in all kinds of scandals and misconduct. So it is important to have a moral compass set in the right direction, towards positive, towards light, towards good, rather than the inverse. And to have the desire and the practice and the knowledge and the commitment to do the relative cleanup work or maturing work, healing work in the rest of what I teach. But I do think that this reorientation will assist in seeing clearly and assist in our ascension process to higher knowledge, to higher planes, to higher wisdom, higher dimensions, really. So this is going to be a course in and of itself that will probably eventually have a weekly group check-in once I get enough people interested. But it can also be a go at your own pace thing. It can be a combination of both. For some of you that I'm already working in that customized one-on-one kind of way on a month-to-month basis with, then I'll probably just quote-unquote grandfather you in and let you experience this too, because I do think it's so very important. But if you are purchasing and paying for and signing up for and participating in individual courses that I offer, at this point I have yoga, meditation / the 5 basics, fasting, feasting, and breatharianism, and now Koan practice. So I'll have 4 courses to choose from. If you're doing it a la carte like that, then the pricing structure that is standard applies. Otherwise, if we're working in a customized way, I might intermingle the different courses for you, but that will reflect in our payment agreement as well. So I hope you enjoy this. Whatever that means, it's immensely enjoyable for me. But I hope it's helpful. not just for enjoyment. I hope eventually what is helpful is enjoyable for you. So reach out if you're interested in this to sign up, and stay tuned for the first Koan videos. I'm excited. Namaste.